Square Enix says it's done with PlayStation exclusivity after profit drop. Oh, baby. This doesn't really surprise anybody. We've talked about this a bit in the last few weeks. You can see in its latest earnings release, Square Enix reports a profit drop of 69% year over year, thanks in part to MMO and mobile device sales declines and also growing operational losses from losses, I can't read today, from high dev cost amortization, even if sales are up slightly. But the company has made it clear it plans to make the most of those high development costs with releases on more platforms. Square Enix will, quote, aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs. Many of Square Enix's biggest games have been locked into platform partnerships like last year's Final Fantasy XVI and this year's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, both out on a single system, the PS5. Even if that console is very popular, Square Enix now fully understands they cannot limit themselves to this strategy no matter what kind of relationship they've had with Sony. Some are saying this reflects poorly on Sony, but I mean, any of these other companies would lock up exclusive third-party deals for big games if they could. The onus here is really on Square Enix for doing this for so long with for so many big games, and now they've realized they finally have to expand for many of these titles. It's not clear if this means the games I just mentioned specifically will come to other platforms. However, the thing with Square Enix is that they have been struggling in recent years to find like the hook, the mass market appeal, because Capcom is able to put out games like even a Dragon's Dogma 2 that appeals to people who have never played Dragon's Dogma before, appeals to people who have never played any of the games from that studio before, and they see the clips and they're like, that looks cool and badass and I want to jump into it. And Square Enix has just struggled with that. And I think part of it, you know, my personal theories are that I think Final Fantasy has a very devoted fan base, but Final Fantasy demonstrably is not great at appealing to new audiences. You are either a Final Fantasy fan or you are just like, it's just something that is something you're aware of, but you just are not like that into it. You don't buy into it. And I know from personal experience, a lot of friends of mine that are like, yeah, I've heard of Final Fantasy. I know what Final Fantasy is, but I saw 16 come out and 16 is just too much. Like, I don't know where to even start. Kind of a bit of a barrier for me. And so they just hold off. And it's like I've done with the MS Paint example before. Like, whenever you're selling any product, you don't want any barriers at all in the way preventing people from buying your product. Like, if you imagine a little corridor, you know, you could imagine you got a big room at the end of the corridor with massive treasures. And the treasures here are the joy and the amazement that will be found if you play Final Fantasy, let's just say Final Fantasy 16, okay? Great game, very impressive. You'll have a great time if you play it. But most games, like say, what's one that has great mass market appeal? Like Red Dead Redemption 2. It's a sequel. It's an established franchise. There is lore that's referenced within the campaign of it. But when you see it and you see the trailers, there's only a couple doors, like the $70, or rather at the time it was $60 full price tag. And then, you know, at the time it was on current generation hardware. So that wasn't really a speed bump. So really, like, the only hiccup and the only hesitance somebody might have is the initial cost. Everyone is talking positively about it. Everybody's saying you should definitely try it. There's just so many reasons to go into it. And there's only like one door in between. But with Final Fantasy 16, it's a little bit different. With Final Fantasy 16, people will look at the 16 as like a barrier because, like, I don't know the lore of the world. And like 15 other games at least. That's a lot. And then they get told, no, you can play this by itself. You don't need to play the others. You can have a great time with it. But that's still a barrier. Somebody thinks about it. And then there's, you know, the full price tag. And then you hear people talk about, you know, how it's super cinematic, but also the dialogue's a little slow. It's definitely taking its time to tell stories and stuff. And, you know, you just end up with a series of doors in the way from you getting over here. And if you're a fan of Final Fantasy 16, none of these bother you. You know, you just walk right around them and you go through a separate tunnel and go just like straight to the door. But if you don't have experience with Final Fantasy, there's a lot more barriers involved and it causes a lot of hesitancy Furthermore, I think Square Enix, you know, we talked about this just on Friday. They are so desperate to find something to latch onto to make more money that they're doing stuff that really makes you hesitant to support them as a company. And what I mean is, like, they are still, as of March, actively pursuing partnerships for NFTs, like NFT integration into their games. And this is something like even Ubisoft, who we all kind of poke fun at for doing stuff like this. Even Ubisoft has walked back their NFT pursuits and are like, it's probably not worth the trouble. But Square Enix is still pursuing it. You know, it's crazy. But this is something they're still doing. They're still pursuing the NFT thing. We just haven't really seen the implementation. But if they're getting more and more desperate, they need more and more money. I wouldn't be surprised if this summer they announce some games or something and they're like, oh yeah, we've got the new Final Fantasy final part of the trio, you know, for Final Fantasy VII. And it's going to have a brand new NFT marketplace or something, and people are going to lose their minds. Hopefully they're more aware than that, but they're still pursuing it. It's wild. I heard somewhere that NFTs are in use in Japan, but not what Americans would think of as NFTs. Maybe that's why they're still hooked on it. I've said for a while, there is hypothetically a use case where NFTs could be very pro-consumer and could be really cool. And the instance and example I've brought up is like, if you were able to go and buy an NFT, or rather a digital copy of a video game, and then that has a non-fungible token tied to it. So you have, like, you know, a copy of Red Dead Redemption 1 on Steam that you bought. And then because it has a non-fungible token tied to it, you would be able to, in theory, sell that token to a buddy of yours for $5 or give it to them. And then they would own that very unique digital token that identifies itself as a license for this game. So you'd be able to sell digital games back and forth to each other instead of just like renting them from online stores. So you'd be able to sell digital copies of games that you've bought. That's something that's super cool, right? But there is no way on earth that they would ever use it that way. Steam, I don't think would ever implement something like that. They wouldn't be interested because then, you know, that causes their sales to drop. Why would they do that? Like, why would they encourage you to do that? The whole premise of the digital thing that makes it so profitable is that margins are super wide. You don't have to pay for distribution and stuff. And you also, if you don't have a game, like there's no used copies of games, you still have to buy them through a digital storefront. You can try to pirate them, but then you miss out on updates and patches, and online stuff won't work and all that stuff. So the one potential use case where I'd be like, okay, that's a cool use of NFTs. The one use case where I would potentially support them, there is no way on earth that these companies would ever pursue it. Instead, all you ever hear about NFTs is like, oh, you'll be able to buy a cosmetic, and then, you know, through like maybe a gacha or loot box system, you'll be able to get new cosmetics that then you can sell and trade with other people. And every time you sell and trade them, we will take a cut as the brokerage firm basically selling these NFTs between players. It's just meant to get more money out of you. So, you know, if companies like Square were pursuing, you know, digital licensing so that you could sell digital copies of games back and forth between players, that would be good. That would be a pro-consumer move, and that could really revolutionize multiple industries. I mean, even online music, you'd be able to buy albums through like iTunes, for example, if they even sell music anymore. And then you'd be able to like sell an album to somebody when you're done with it and when you don't really listen to it anymore, just like you used to be able to sell CDs. But now, you know, like there's no way anybody would ever pursue that, because every executive knows that that's not going to make them more money. That will make them less money. So there's no way that they ever do it. There's a reason Steam is about to change their family sharing, so you can no longer share your games with anybody. At least in the beta right now, you cannot. Maybe they'll change it in the final implementation, but I highly doubt it. Yeah. And I will say, you know, I won't call anybody out, but I do know somebody, I do know a couple of people that share their libraries with each other, and it has straight up like saved them thousands of dollars over the years, I'm sure. Because one of them will buy the AAA game that's a single player game, and then they'll share their library with somebody, and then they'll download it and then go offline and play it after they verify it. And it just, I'm sure they lose money on it, but that's the thing. Like NFTs, there is a world in which NFTs could be useful, But the only way in which it would be useful would lose the companies that are pushing it money. So there's no way we will ever see it. So instead, all we ever hear about NFTs are ways for companies to milk you for more money, which is why it immediately turns people off, which is, you know, unfortunate. It's why when people said NFTs are a scam, I was like, well, we got to be maybe a little bit more precise, because there is a world in which NFTs would be really good for consumers, but because the companies are deciding how they're implemented, there's no way it will ever be good for consumers. But like, not all NFTs are necessarily scams, but the only ones you ever hear about definitely are. You know, did I ever buy NFTs? No. You couldn't pay me to take an NFT. I am no. No. I'm good. This news, we just talked about the Square Enix thing. This tweet comes after the news broke of Square Enix wanting to go less exclusive on PlayStation, okay? Whatever you're imagining will not prepare you for that. Like, what I'm about to read you from somebody is one of the most unhinged, out of touch, insane things I've ever read in my life, okay? Buckle up, buckaroo. It's wild. From Magomed Anyebomedov. PS5 owners are now treated like black people in 1939 USA. We are now second-class gamers, and neither Sony or Square care about us anymore. Just like black people had to give up their civil rights, we PlayStation gamers are having to forfeit our exclusives. I mean, what do you even say? And apparently this guy's real. Apparently people like went back into his post history and found that he said things similar to this for a while, and he's just that unhinged. Yeah, I don't I don't even know like what to say or how to frame it. Like it's just, you're not even wrong. You're so far away from even being wrong that you're just like, the level of brain rot that would be required for this is unbelievable. Like the amount of just mental vapidity is shocking. When I came across that, I was like, I don't even know what to say. Like Square Enix is like, yeah, we can't really find a profitable way to release our games that cost $300 million to make. We can't find a profitable way to release them exclusively on one platform. So we're going to open it up to other platforms. He's like, I am oppressed. It's just unreal.